Hello, buddy. Welcome into the Casual Sports Podcast. I'm Al Cabrera. That's Mike Wolfgang. 2 days left in the week, Mike. Or no, not 2 days left. 1 day left in the regular week. Last day of the week for the show.
Scared me there.
You're right. I was just like, wait a minute. What day is it? My mind's fumbled around with dates at this point. Got a lot going on when it comes to dates. So sometimes you lose track of them. It happens.
Yep.
But it's been a long week in sports. Kind of a up and down in terms of news, because obviously start of the week, you get the All-Star game, you get all the stuff that comes with that, a lot of talking points. Then now we're here on Friday, pretty much down to not a whole lot going on in the sports realm. Obviously, we still got to talk about the SEC here coming up a little bit on the show. But Mike, I told you that today was going to be kind of your show, so I guess I'll hand it over to you for now. And why don't you take over for me?
Well, I was going to say, if you're going to go your SEC, are you saving that, or?
Well, let's go. You want to start off SEC?
If you want to do that, because then I got an interesting list when you're done with your rankings. I'll talk about that too when you're done talking about records.
Right.
So whatever we got left.
Here's my SEC list. The East is definitely kind of the most confusing one, maybe the most changeable one. We know Alabama's taking the West. Texas A&M, Mississippi State, they've both really kind of been that 9-3, 8-4 type of team these last couple of years. I'm not expecting that to change. I'm buying into Arkansas. I'm going to say here just a little bit, and the same reason I'm buying into Arkansas is the same reason I've bought into a lot of teams this year. Favorable matchups throughout the season. I think they start week one with a loss against Cincinnati, even though it's at home. That's kind of that big question mark. I mean, if they win that, then Arkansas could be a 10-2 team. If you look at the rest of their schedule, they got South Carolina up next. Should be a winnable matchup. Missouri State, FCS. That's a purchased win in there. Then they got their first hard matchup outside of Cincinnati opener. They go on the road into Texas A&M. That one's kind of a question mark, and it begins kind of this 3-week question mark, I think, for Arkansas when you look at it, because they go with Texas A&M, then they host Alabama, then they go and visit Mississippi State. It's a very hard 3-week stance, and then after that, they're going to stay on the road, and they go up to BYU, and BYU might not be the competitive strength of Arkansas, but playing in that environment, it can get you. I mean, those BYU Cougar fans, they get into football. There's not a whole lot else to do up there, and they know how to, get that environment going. So Arkansas could have struggles, especially coming out of a 3-game grind against A&M, Arkansas, or against Alabama and Mississippi State. It's a hard match. And then they have to stay on the road, go back into the SEC, and go into Auburn, which is another hard game. And then they come out of it, and they're taking on the team that I have number one in the independents in Liberty. Then they host LSU, Ole Miss. They finish out the season at Mizzou. So you kind of have this middle portion of the schedule that has a huge question mark, yes. But to me, if you see this team and they come out, they beat Cincinnati day one. I like Cincinnati. We'll see what they do without Desmond Ridder, though. That's the big question with Cincy is what are they going to do without him and Sauce Gardner? But if you see them come out there and can take one of those 3 games against A&M, Bama, and Mississippi State, I like this Arkansas team to be able to go into places like Auburn, take on Liberty at home, go into BYU and win. I think that gauntlet they go through in that middle third, maybe second quarter of the season with A&M, Alabama, Mississippi State, that's the test. They can lose all those games and win out everywhere else and still finish with this 9-3 record. So I like 9-3 as a potential record. 8-4 might be a little bit more realistic. Maybe a 7-5. We'll see how they handle a team like Cincinnati and Liberty. I'm interested to see how they play in those games as well. But I think Arkansas is definitely a team to watch out for this season. They've been, I'll say, a little odd as of recent years because they started out really well last year, kind of fell off. I want to see what they do this season. I'm interested with them. Auburn, I like it, but I still don't think they know how to put together a total package. LSU, they make moves. Brian Kelly, I just don't think he's got much going on down there with that Tigers football team. He's going to need a few years to get that team up to strength to compete in the SEC. We know it's not, hey, you come in here and you're going to be good immediately. That's not how this conference works. There are very few conferences where you could do that. especially here in the Power 5. Big Ten and the SEC are not one of those where you can make that instantaneous impact outside of a few places where they already are loaded up. I mean, you saw Scott Frost and the Big Ten's taken years to put that program together. And Nebraska still hasn't come together. PJ Fleck in Minnesota, it took him a few years to get going. Mel Tucker took till his second year to get something in there, to get something down here in the SEC. I mean, how long has it been coming for Tennessee to get to this point on their side? Same for Kentucky, Texas A&M, Mississippi State. They've all made coaching changes in the last 5 years, and they've allowed a coach to kind of sit there and build a program up to this status. And you go over into the SEC East side, I got Kentucky's number one. They got Will Levis, who's at the moment being rated as one of the higher rated quarterbacks inside of the SEC this year, a former Penn State guy of yours. A very odd dude, likes mayonnaise in his coffee.
What?
One. Yep, no. He
Where'd you hear that?
Huh?
Where'd you hear that at?
Hear it. I saw it. The dude was on an interview putting mayonnaise in his coffee because the interviewer was asking him, is this actually a thing? And he went, yeah, I'll show you. He was doing it, and he's a weird dude, man. I'm glad he's not in Penn State.
That sounds like a Penn State type of thing, but
right. It's like that dude's perfect to play in the Duke Mayo Bowl. We need to get him there. I don't know how. I don't know what their record needs to be for them to get to a Duke Mayo Bowl, but it needs to happen for Kentucky. I'm going 10-2. Forget New Year's 6. Put Kentucky in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. It needs to happen. Their quarterback is a mayonnaise fanatic. He's a freak. I love it. I love when you have a quarterback that you just got to question sometimes. Just give me that wild card at quarterback. They're not always the most reliable, but they can be fun. And I think when you look overall at this Kentucky team as a total package, I think they do actually have something here. I don't know if it's going to be, something good or something completely wild. But I think you look at that schedule, especially out of conference. Out of conference this year, very favorable for them. Miami, Ohio, Youngstown State, Northern Illinois. Then they'll finish out the year taking on their rival, Louisville. But they get a home game for that. So out of conference play, very realistic 4-0 for Kentucky out of conference. They're going to have Florida as their first conference game. That's going to be week 2 for them. And I like that matchup. I don't love what Florida has. They put some of their best players into the NFL in recent years, so I don't think they're going to have a total package this year to have those top caliber guys. I don't even see 9 wins on the ledger for Florida. But you go into conference play, you got Florida, then you're going to have 2 more weeks of out of conference. Then your real conference schedule begins, and it's Ole Miss, South Carolina. 2 wins should be easy there. So you got a 6-0 start to the year. I don't like Ole Miss. Obviously, losing their big quarterback here. I forgot to take away our bottom piece. I got Ole Miss down 5-7 at the bottom of the West. You lose your quarterback. It's not going to be a fun year for you if you don't have a quarterback in the SEC. That's one thing even more important than the Big Ten of having a quarterback competing. If you even want to win a game, you need a quarterback in the SEC. And that's something I don't know if Ole Miss is going to have this year. So a 6-0 start for Kentucky, very easily in the picture. Then they got 2 harder weeks up, but I think they can take one of them. They host Mississippi State. Then they go into Tennessee. I think they can beat Mississippi State. I don't think they beat Tennessee on the road. Then they stay on the road, take on Mizzou. Should be an easy dub. Then they host Vanderbilt. Again, easy dub. Then they are hosting Georgia, and that's a toss-up because at this point in the season, I'm looking at about 8-win Georgia and an 8-win Kentucky. It's going to look like a battle for the top of the SEC East, especially with Tennessee in that conversation. So, actually, I guess I do have Kentucky beating Tennessee. That's why they're above them in a tiebreaker. So, we'll see what happens all in all, but coming down to those final few weeks, the SEC East is going to be an interesting one to watch. I don't know if Kentucky is going to beat Georgia, especially late in the season. I'm really interested to see what Georgia has at that point. I don't think Georgia's going to start well, but they might finish well, and that's the big difference here. And then against Louisville to finish out the season, I like Kentucky a lot to potentially take this division away from the likes of Georgia. And Tennessee, I think, is going to have an up year. You look at Tennessee's schedule, again, another favorable list for them, especially their out-of-conference play. Ball State, Akron, and Pitt, and Tennessee Martin. Easy stuff out of conference play. Pitt's the hardest game, and we don't even know what Pitt's going to have, and that's week 2. I'm not confident Pitt's going to be put together by week 2 of the season. Then they're going to have Florida to start SEC play in week 4. After that, it's LSU. Then they're hosting Alabama. I don't think they win that. Then they host Tennessee Martin. Then they're hosting Kentucky. Then they go into Georgia, but then Mizzou, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. If you're looking for one of the easiest schedules to go for betting, it might be Tennessee when you look all in all. Very easily, this is an 8-win team, if not a 9-win team or more. So that's why I'm looking at Tennessee this year. I think they're going to be one of those overrated 10-win teams, though. Once they go into a New Year's Six bowl game or something of that likes, I think they get absolutely dogged on by whoever they go up against, because you look at how easy this schedule is. I mean, they can lose their biggest profile games in Alabama, Georgia, and Kentucky and be a 3-loss team. So now you're looking at a 9-3 Tennessee. People will be like, that's a good team right there. In reality, who was their best win outside of those 3 games, which would be losses? What would you say? Pitt, Florida, LSU? None of those teams right now are good. So Tennessee is your big fraud of the SEC East this year. A fraudulent schedule. If they don't end up better than 8 wins, it's an embarrassment for the Vols. That means the team's even worse in the fan base, and that's saying a lot. But I think Tennessee is a shoo-in for 8 or 9 wins. They're going to be at the top of the SEC East in that conversation all season long, especially if Georgia does not compete as well as they did last year, like I don't think they will. So that's definitely something to watch out for. Tennessee's going to be in that conversation. I think Kentucky is as well. And Georgia will be right there. We'll see what they have. I'm not confident to buy back in that they're going to have all their pieces together. The offense improved a little, but the defense, they lost their pretty much the entire dominant defense. All those guys are sitting in the first round of the NFL at this point. So we'll see what happens all in all there. Mike, what are your thoughts here on the SEC going into the season?
I'm going to focus a little bit on the East part of it too, because I think that's more –
right.
I think there's a lot more
the only
going on.
conversation to have. No one's taking the West away from Bama. They have a Heisman Trophy winner coming back for his 3rd season. Most likely his, NFL kind of campaign, looking for that. In the election year, he's looking to get sent off to the NFL.
I think the West part of it, though, I really do think Alabama, it's a good chance they could go undefeated or lose 1 game. I think what's going on underneath them, though, is I think there's a little bit of action there with those 3 teams. But with the East part of it, I think it's not likely Georgia's going to be as dominant as they were last year. There's a very good chance they could be good again and potentially win this side of the conference. But I do like what you're saying with Kentucky. And I think Tennessee, potentially, I know you said you were talking about that tiebreaker part of it. I actually have Tennessee beating Kentucky in that game, in my mind.
I think that's a toss-up right there. I want to see what momentum feels at that point in the season. That's why when I was putting that together, I had Kentucky beating Tennessee. It's because Kentucky was at a point they were kind of riding a wave of momentum. When you're kind of putting the season together game by game, going week by week, you don't see it all as one big picture all the time, but you kind of feel the way the landscape is moving. In that one game, if it was any other week, I got Tennessee winning. But in that week, it felt Kentucky over Tennessee.
It just feels like a lot of their games, Tennessee's, like you were saying with Kentucky, that they're favorable in, and they're weaker matchups, like you said, with their out of conference schedule with Tennessee. But I brought this up too because there's a list I had that I saw, and I think I said it in the group chat. And are we done talking about this, the SEC? Because I want to get your take on some of this stuff. So there's a list of like tiers that, they do this every offseason in every sport, tiers of who's contenders, who's not. There's 3 teams that are national title contenders, and I think 2 are obvious with Ohio State and Alabama.
Yep.
And they got Georgia thrown in there. It's according to an account called Pick Six College Football. I don't know if you heard of it, but I like it. I follow it a little bit. And they got Georgia in there. I brought up this now because we were just talking about Georgia. I think there's a chance they could be good again, but not as dominant as last year because it was like a seesaw. Their offseason was because, like you said, they lost a lot of their defense. Their offense wasn't the strongest part last year. Now they kind of improved that. They lose their defense part of it. So I'm not. To me, there's really 2 teams you can really bet on. Those are 2 teams that other teams in it, Ohio State and Alabama. I don't know about Georgia. I don't really know about anybody else either.
I think Georgia is a huge bust chance. They got a high ceiling, but that ceiling is made of glass, and it's very easily just going to shatter like that in an instant. And I think early on in the season, you're really going to see, I think, what this team is made of. It's not the hardest schedule, but when you look week 1, starting against Oregon, it looks like a loss. And I know that's not what Georgia fans want to hear, but Oregon's returning a lot of talent on their side. They're going to have a top running back who went down with an ACL injury last year. Obviously, their leading running back from last season transferred out, but he was the backup to start the year. And they're going to have their top guy coming up. And you remember what he did against Ohio State. He was flat out phenomenal in that Buckeye game. He was tearing Ohio State to shreds with the ground game. And I think when you look at that and you kind of have to come back to that, you got to watch out. This is a really good Oregon Ducks football team. I like them in the Pac-12 this year. And this isn't a team that I typically like when you look at the season. I normally go, it's Pac-12. They're overrated. I like Oregon football this season. And I don't have huge reasonings for it, but I think when you just kind of look at this team and you see what they got as a unit, I think they got something at least to build off of from last season. I know they're going to be working with the new head coach, and that's definitely going to, I think, kind of make this a question mark. But they were so good last year, and CJ Verdell is a machine, and he's one of those guys very fun to watch. I want to see if Georgia's going to have any of that defense stuff. That's my only thing. I don't think Georgia's going to have defense anymore. They're going to have a good defense because that's the way the system is built. But I don't think they're going to be that level we saw last year that was second in college football, was putting up records, holding opponents to 0 points. They were phenomenal last year. You can't live up to that.
And I agree with you about Georgia, and I kind of agree about Oregon too because it is a Pac-12, but this list doesn't really agree with that. I'll read the whole rest of it so we can just discuss it all. So
here's something from Georgia. They're only returning 10 starters.
Yeah. And how many are on defense? Not many.
I'm looking at that right now, but yeah, it's I got three guys returning on the defensive side. Right. Yeah, that's all I got is 3 defensive starters returning. And that's the big thing when I'm talking about Georgia. That defense is going to be completely new. And we've seen great defenses. I'm going to throw my own team under the bus. Ohio State, they were the king of great defenses. Nobody was getting past their defense in the Big Ten for a long time. And all it took was sending one more guy to the NFL and it hit an utter collapse, a wall. And now people make fun of how bad Ohio State's defense has been the last, 2-3 seasons. We sent Chase Young to the NFL in the 2019 was his last season. So 2020, 2021, 2022, Ohio State's had embarrassingly bad defenses. And even when Chase Young was there, they had no secondary or linebackers. And that's only gotten worse. So sometimes you kind of have this big mindset, that's a team you got to watch out for. And it all comes crashing down in an instant because you sent one too many guys to the NFL at one time.
Yeah, I think that's what Ohio State's thing too is their defense. They normally have solid guys that are, I don't want to say average, but above average or solid. And you normally have like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 guys that are up there are legit first round type talents like Chase Young. But it's impossible to have a defense like Georgia had last year. That's a once in a couple years or generation type of thing because. And that's what they won last year. And Georgia's never really been a team that's like, hey, they have explosive offenses. They're not that type of team. They never really have been. So
I'll say back in the day when Herschel Walker was running the football, they might have had explosive offense.
I mean, back then, but
right, not in the last 20 years. You don't look at Georgia and go, they got offense. No, yeah. Georgia wins with defense,
and that's like the highlight of their offensive stance in their history is Herschel Walker. In that,
right. So that's a long time ago, obviously. He's got to know if you have an award named after you in college football, let's just say it's been a while since you were playing.
Yeah. So I agree with you on that part of it. That's what they hang their hat on in defense. And when you're losing, when you only have 3 guys returning, it's a lot of new faces. That's 8 other guys that are new faces that haven't played together. Not that they can't get it done, but it's not likely. So
brief time out here on this list. We'll get right back to it in a second. I do want to put this out. I kind of saw this talked about the other day. Actually, I think it came from Charles Woodson himself. He kind of threw this, or I don't think it was from him. It was from somebody that knows him. They were talking about the Heisman Award and the fact that defense players don't really win it. And they threw out the idea, create a new defense, make the Heisman an Offensive Player of the Year award. We already know it is. And make a Defensive Player of the Year, call it the Woodson, because when you look in college football history, he's the guy. Charles Woodson was the standard when it came to, great defense. Charles Woodson was that guy, and I saw that. And I'm like, I kind of like doing that. And we're talking about great defense here, so I thought I'd throw this in at that point. What are your thoughts on maybe a Defensive Player of the Year award to kind of push the Heisman a little bit more offensive, so we can stop having this conversation every year of, oh, it's the great defensive player that really does deserve it and was 100 times better than whatever quarterback threw up for the award, and they don't end up winning it.
Well, as you were talking, I'm trying to look up the last time a defensive player ever won it. Yeah,
it was Woodson.
Woodson back in '97, the last time. And
Hutchinson came second this past year and should have won.
And you know what? It's pretty much like occasionally get some running backs and their receivers in there, but it's normally quarterbacks.
It's quarterback.
It's normally a quarterback award. And Devontae Smith won it a couple years ago, but that doesn't happen too much.
And I believe he was the third wide receiver to ever win it.
Yeah, so that tells you that too. But I do agree with it, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's just you can't really have in college football because there's so many different teams, so many different players that are good. You can't just have one award. I think for just an MVP type of an award. I think you do have.
Well, there is the second one. It's the Walter Camp Award, and I think a lot of times the Walter Camp Award actually goes to the better player. It just doesn't have the Heisman recognition.
I think it takes away if you added the defensive Heisman, if we call it that. I think it does take away from the actual Heisman itself. Yeah. But I think it's necessary to kind of do it because it doesn't happen with any other player, any other people on that side of the ball, let alone. And like I said, with the offensive side, it's like 70% quarterbacks usually win it.
I think it's 90%, Mike. It's about.
I'm trying to be nice because there has been some running backs and receivers, but
right.
But I think it does kind of take away from the actual Heisman. But why not? We talked about a lot of times during this week that why not change things up in other sports? What's wrong with it?
Right. I mean, especially when we get to the end of the year, we're talking about the Heisman race, and we all just kind of go like, we need a change up here. I know we're going to have this conversation again once we get down to the Heisman at the end of the season. So let's open the door now. Let's start that conversation so that somebody could get this thing started.
And even last year, like I'm not saying he should have won it, but if you had this defensive type of Heisman, Aiden Hutchinson wins it last year easily.
Yeah. By
the year he had. And if it wasn't for that just being an offensive, in our minds, offensive award, he probably would have won it last year if it wasn't for all that standard and whatever we call it. So, and there's been a lot of great defensive players the last couple of years that have not won it.
I got the perfect trophy as well for it. I want a gold brick. Because what's the best defense? A brick wall.
Brick wall smacking you.
Give me a golden brick. That's what the Defensive Player of the Year gets.
Make it
then Woodson. He can smash the Heisman Trophy over the skull.
Make it Woodson with a brick somewhere on the trophy.
Right.
Like on the base of it or him holding a brick or something.
Yeah, when he's down in that 3-point stance, have him holding a brick.
Yeah.
Something like that. I think that's the way to go.
I'm open.
But back to your list here. Go ahead, take it back.
I'll just read the rest and then we'll just talk about it because there's some teams that we were talking, at least on your projections for records, that you had a little bit higher that this list has a little bit lower and vice versa. So we have those teams I just mentioned, the 3 national title contenders. Next part of it is teams that can make the college football playoff, and there's a good amount of them and some that are pretty reasonable. You got NC State that I kind of like that one too. Got Clemson back up there after their down year last year. Oklahoma after losing their head coach. Michigan, Utah, USC, and then Notre Dame. Do you want me to keep reading, or you want me to break down piece by piece?
Just keep going, then we'll talk about it now. I'm just throwing them up as you were talking through them.
So teams set to shock people that they're projecting. They got Utah in there. They got Liberty in there. Penn State, Arkansas, LSU, BYU, Purdue, who Penn State plays the first week, Wisconsin, Nebraska, who I know you were talking about, and then they got Miami in there with a new head coach. Teams who should make bowl games, they got Iowa in there, Pitt, Tennessee, who we were just talking about, which I think they should be a little bit higher on this list. Wake Forest, Oregon, who you were just talking about, that's kind of low from your standards, but a lot of people don't always buy into them because of the conference they're in.
Right.
Kentucky, Baylor, Texas, Air Force, and North Carolina. 2 more. They got teams set to regress this year. I'm sorry. Oklahoma State, Louisiana Tech.
No, that's not Louisiana Tech. That's Louisiana.
Oh, Louisiana. Sorry. They're not even on there. Yeah, what am I saying? Cincinnati, Michigan State, SMU, Western Kentucky, Nevada, and your Coastal Carolina team.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's very realistic that the Chanticleers in the Raging Cajuns, both down here in the Sun Belt Conference can both see a regression. I just love the teams, and it's hard to say after this last year's seasons, where especially Louisiana. You know what? I'm not buying into Louisiana's regression. They've had a couple of great seasons in a row. I think they're here to stay in the Sun Belt West. I like what they do. Sun Belt saw some realignment this offseason, but I think they can stay up there. I think they're a really good team, and I think they can. I don't know about undefeated. I mean, we talked about this yesterday. I don't know about undefeated. That's where I want to see them. I don't know if that's where they're going to end up, but I think it's very realistic that they're still a 10-win team at the end of the season. Coastal Carolina, all right, I'll give you that. They might see some regression this year. They had a really great team last year. They sent a guy to the NFL out of it. And you don't see that a ton out of the Sun Belt, but definitely a team that you look at, definitely one that I could see regressing. Cincinnati, I'll buy into that. I could see it because 12-0, being a perfect season last year, pushed them into the college football playoff. That's kind of the easiest pick out there. One loss is a regression from last year for them. So that's kind of the easy throw in there type of thing. Michigan State on regression. Yeah, obviously, you're not working with Kenneth Walker anymore. Buy into that. Then you got SMU on this list. I don't know about that. I think SMU, like I said with Louisiana, they put together a couple good seasons, and I like their schedule this year. They got a favorable one, and I don't think the American is at that level it was 3 years ago. It has started to kind of fall back down, especially because UCF hasn't been that great of a team recently. They really made the conference a couple of years ago when Scott Frost was down there, and they were in that conversation. They were undefeated. People talking, is that going to be the first team to make it? Since then, I think the American kind of has had a little bit of a slip and fall. They look like they're building back up, and I really hope it happens. But I definitely think it's one of those keep an eye on. SMU, though, you saw them last year. They were a great team overall. They weren't just heavy on the offense or heavy on the defense that made them good. They were a solid all-around team. Then you're going to have Western Kentucky. I'll buy that. 7-5 is what I got. They're losing Bailey Zapp, the nation's leading quarterback. So, yeah, obviously there's going to be some regression there. You're not replacing that instantaneously. Then they got Nevada with a bit of a fall-off. I don't know. I still like them at 9-3. They're losing what? Carson Strong to the NFL, I believe it was. I think they got enough left over. I think they can do just fine. And then, as I said, yeah, Chanticleers. I'll give you that one.
If that's a standard by them losing a game or two, yeah, that's regression.
Right. That's what you're talking about with Louisiana and Cincinnati and the Chanticleers. Yeah, okay, one less game is definitely a regression. A regression to me sounds like they're going to fall under 500. Because when I'm talking about regression in college football, 1 or 2 games isn't a complete change. And I don't think a team like Cincinnati's fallen under 500 after a perfect season last year. When I'm talking regression, that's a big change.
Because look at the categories in this list. Because regression, that's probably where you throw Cincinnati and Coastal Carolina in. Because teams who should make bowl games are going to make a bowl game, both of them. So that by that standard, yeah, they should be in regression. And a team like Western Kentucky, like you said, I could buy into that too, because you mentioned the loss they just had. I mentioned yesterday the loss that they had with Tinsley going to Penn State. He was one of the top receivers throughout the country last year. Yeah. So that's a big loss for them. And the team I don't know if you have it pulled up, but Colorado down there to miss a bowl game.
Yeah, here, let me pull out the schedule for them.
And the 5 teams in that last one are Duke, Texas Tech, Indiana, Colorado, and Vanderbilt. Do you really throw Vanderbilt and Indiana and Duke in there? Because we know they're going to miss a bowl game. Throwing somebody else in there to make it interesting, at least.
Right. I mean, I got Duke. What do I have this season? 4-8. So, I mean, close, but not there. Vandy, obviously. I mean, I got them 4-8. I don't have them as the worst team in the SEC East, actually. They have a couple purchase wins, a little bit more than Mizzou did. So, I got them there. But then you look, Indiana, I have as a 2-10 team. Texas Tech out of the Big 12. I have 3-9. So, yeah, some of those feel like an obvious ones. But
give us some interesting
to go up here, look at Colorado, a team that we all kind of like. I have as an 8-4 squad. I think you look at this schedule. They start things off, Big 12 matchup. They're going up against TCU, but they get home field advantage. That should be a dub for them. I don't like TCU this year. Then they go into Air Force, should be another win. Air Force is a fine program, but they're not going to take down a Power 5 school. Then they got Minnesota, which I think is the interesting matchup out there. When you're talking about a team that wasn't afraid to schedule out a conference, give me Colorado. I want this athletic director coaching at some of the bigger schools, because this athletic director's got some balls to go out here and schedule nothing but Power 5 schools outside of Air Force for the season. They have one non-Power 5 opponent on the schedule. Show me any other team around the country that did that And I'll give them a round of applause too. Give me their props. I didn't see very many. If there was another one outside of Colorado that went, all right, let's go Power 5 or bust this year. Let's put this strength of schedule out there. I know TCU ain't a great squad, but I don't think Alabama would go out here and do it, even with the best team in college football this season. I don't think they're going out there and giving you 11 or 12 games all Power 5. That's not what they do. Hell, I think they got Austin PA on the schedule this year. Who cares? But to see what Colorado's got, I think that Minnesota game goes to Minnesota because I like Minnesota. But you're looking at a 3-1 start as they got UCLA after that on the 24th of September. Then it's starting on October. They're going into Arizona. Dumb. So 4-1 to start that. Then they got Cal after that. I got to watch out for Cal this year. Like I said, I kind of like them to make some noise, but you toss that either way. Oregon State should be a win. Arizona State, make it close. It's at home, so I probably go Colorado. Then they host Oregon. I'm giving Oregon that game. Then they got USC. This is that hard stretch to finish out the year where I think Colorado looks really good going into those final 6 weeks of the season. Then they fall apart against Arizona State, Oregon, USC. Washington should be a win in there. And then Utah. You're talking about a really hard slate of games, and you could lose all 4 of those. And maybe that Minnesota game, you're looking at a 7-5 season at worst, losing all of your hardest games. And all you have to do is win one of them. You're 8-4. And the Pac-12 North is going to be non-competitive this season, in my opinion. You look at who they got. I don't really love either team or any team up there outside of Oregon, really. But you got Cal's definitely a strong opponent up there in the North, but the South is going to be competitive. And you look at Colorado, they're one of those teams that pretty much taken on all the North schools in this season. I think it opens the door. I mean, like I said, worse is 7-5. Very reasonably, we're looking at an 8-9 win season for Colorado.
Yeah, I didn't agree with them being there, but some points I kind of pulled out from, at least for myself, from this list. I don't like Colorado in that spot. If you obviously can't fit everybody on this list, but a team that you just mentioned that I think should at least be on the category of teams to shock people should be Minnesota. I think they're gonna have a good year this year. I do. And teams some that kind of surprised me a little bit.
I don't see on this list either?
What's up?
Iowa State.
Yeah,
or
that's
Baylor.
The team they're not on there either.
Well, Baylor is actually, they're under teams who should make a bowl game. They got their the Bear logo. Didn't recognize it at first. They don't use that one too much anymore.
Yeah, but they're in there though. But
Baylor to make a bowl game? I mean, that's a safe, easy pick. I mean, I got them as a 10-2 team up there, and then Iowa State 11-1, and they're not mentioned on this list.
And I think Texas is going to make a bowl game. I don't know how back they're going to be this year, but I kind of look at what your projections for them. I think they're a team to not get too excited about. We don't know what's going to happen. I think you could throw USC in there too. I think it's more likely they have a better year than Texas, but we'll see. And some other ones I kind of – obviously, I got to throw my team in there. I think they're where they should be. Teams, they should either be in that one or the one below it. Teams to shock people, teams who should make bowl games. They're definitely going to make a bowl game. But teams to shock people, I don't know if they're totally in that because on paper every year they should be good, but they don't shock anybody. And other than that, there's not really too many question marks, I don't think, in this list. I think pretty much the teams that we were talking about in the Big Ten, Wisconsin, Nebraska, they're where there should be too. Obviously, got to talk about our conference, but I like Utah up there too to make the college football playoff. I think that's an interesting one.
Yeah. I think Utah is definitely in that conversation. I think when you look at teams around, I mean, if you want to go down this list of teams that could make college football playoff, I think the ones I'm not buying towards is Oklahoma and Notre Dame. I think the rest of them have very realistic odds. My big thing, Oklahoma, first-year head coach. They're bringing in Brett Venables from from Clemson. We'll see how he does in his first year. I'm not confident with them running a team for the first year. Clemson, not having Brett Venables for the first time. We'll see how they end up working. I have faith in Dabo Swinney. He's a really good head coach. Maybe not the best guy. You don't agree with everything he does off the field, but at the end of the day, when he's on the field, you got something going with that Clemson team. I like NC State. I said, a lot earlier, I like what they got going on. USC, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because we know Lincoln Riley works well with guys in the transfer portal. It's pretty much what he's working with this season is an entire transfer portal team. Michigan, they were there last year. So, yeah, you got to leave them in that conversation. But I don't like Notre Dame. First year with Marcus Freeman. We'll see what he has, but he doesn't have a quarterback. And you're not making the college football playoff if you don't have a quarterback. we'll see what happens. He's got some young talent to work with, but he's got the second and third stringers from last year and a 4-star freshman coming in who likely won't play. And as I mentioned when we talked about it yesterday or day before with Notre Dame, it's a 1 or 2 year gig until Lloyd Carr's grandson comes up.
Yep. Yeah, and I think another team too. I think last year with Clemson kind of having a down year, it opened up the door for a lot of these teams in ACC, not only for last year but going into this year. You have a team like NC State up there that's normally not up in this part of any list. They're you see right there, you have them going 11-1, and these people have them being at least a contender to make a spot in the college football playoff. I think it opened a lot of doors. And look, now you got them up there, ACC team up there with Clemson. Teams set to shock people. You got Miami up there. That's an ACC team. And you got teams who should make bowl games in Pitt. And I don't think there's any other ones. But still, you normally don't see – that's 4 or 5 ACC teams. You only see 1 or 2 on every list.
Right. Well, Mike, here's this stat for NC State, by the way. In the last decade, they've only had 2 losing seasons.
Yeah.
And if you go back even further, in the 2010s, they only had 2 losing seasons. It's been really good. Now, the highest they found themselves in the AP poll was only up at 14th. That was back in 2017 when they went 9-4. This is a team that's not really getting proper dues. They haven't won bowl games, which does hurt. But I think this is a team you got to watch out for. Dave Doeren, since taking over, he lost his first year, went 3-9. And since then, he's only been under 500 the one time. Doran's building something. 8-4 in 2020, 9-3 in 2021. I like what they got. And, this team hasn't been a highly rated team. They haven't been at the top 10. This was top 10 during the season. They finished 12th. They were 11-3 in 2002, won the Gator Bowl with Chuck Amato, who finished coaching there back after the 2006 season. But this team has, outside of that, never had a 10-win season. So that is the one kind of knock against this school is they don't have that one, kind of standard. But this is looking like it could be a historic season for NC State, and I'm all about it.
Yeah, I am too. I beef up the ACC a little bit. I want to see some parity in it. I want to see some action in it. I just ran through a couple teams that aren't normally, or at least maybe on lists, but they're higher up than they usually are with NC State. And like I said, I don't think they get the credit they deserve. It's normally a pretty solid team. And like I said, I'm not buying Pitt this year, but they had a good year last year. I don't think there's too many lost pieces there, but we'll see what Narduzzi can do. He's talking a little bit of crap too the last couple weeks. He was saying if they're in the Big Ten, they could easily be contending for the Big Ten. I don't buy that at all. Do you really see
what was that, Pitt?
Yeah, Narduzzi said that.
Narduzzi's an idiot.
You're 1-5 in your career.
Hey, Mike, I forgot something about this Wake Forest team that might alter my thoughts on them. I thought Sam Hartman left. Sam Hartman is back. He stayed.
Really?
Because he was entered into the draft at one point and he pulled back, and I didn't remember that.
I was thinking of Sam Howell for a second.
Huh?
I was thinking of Sam Howell for some reason.
Right. Who was UNC. No, Sam Hartman's back for Wake Forest. So they're 100% a competitor going into this season. The ACC Atlantic, hell, what the ACC really needs to do this year to kind of even things out, make it the best 2 teams in the conference go to the ACC championship, because we know whoever wins the Atlantic is taking the conference. That's just how it's been. There's nobody on the coastal side that can compete at the moment.
And
but
last year
with Sam Hartman, Wake is a huge competitor this year, and we've seen them the last couple of seasons. They have been right in that mix. They have been phenomenal to watch. Look at their schedule. They got an FCS opponent to start week 1, should be a win. Vanderbilt week 2 should be a win. Liberty in week 3 at home should be a win. Wake Forest week 4, that becomes the question mark now. And when you talk about that experience with Hartman, I might go ahead and give that win over to Wake Forest and flip things up, so that move Clemson down to 11-0, bump Wake Forest at the moment to a 10-2 school. I got Wake Forest over Florida State, over Army. Heck, I'd give him over Boston College now that I remembered he's back. And I look at this schedule. I'm willing to make the move. I put Wake Forest at an 11-1, maybe undefeated school. They have a couple of hard matchups, but Wake is that team in the ACC Atlantic this year. If I was to redo this, now that I remembered Sam Hartman was back, I probably got Wake Forest taking the ACC.
And they had a little bit of struggle last year, so they got a chip on their shoulder coming to bounce that up or rebound from that. I didn't even, like I said, I thought he was gone too. I was thinking of Sam Howell for some reason, same name, but yeah, whoever does win that part of it, you got different last year when it was Clemson had a down year, everything was different. Pitt goes in there and wins the ACC, so that's different. But hey, Wake Forest can challenge them. I think last year, even though Clemson was down and they weren't themselves, a lot of teams, I don't think after playing them last year, I don't think some teams are afraid of them anymore. At least to go up and challenge them. Not that they think they're not great, but they're not intimidated by them anymore. I think Wake Forest is one of those teams.
In Wake Forest, historically bad. Last year was tied for their greatest year in school history. In fact, it was the highest they've ever appeared in AP polls, which was 10th. The closest they'd ever been back in 1947 when they finished 11th in the polls. However, it was their second ever 11-3 season. This was the first time they had 10 wins and then won their bowl game. Last time, 11-3 in 2006, lost the Orange Bowl with Jim Grobe as their head coach. Now Dave Clawson took over, started out 2014, hasn't had continued success, but he's made it to 6 straight bowl games, won 4 of them. So he's got something building with this Wake Forest team, and I think a lot of recruits have noticed that. And with Sam Hartman sticking it out at quarterback with this school, they're a contender.
Yeah, we'll see. So we burned 40 minutes there in college football.
Yeah, and I got to put this out. Pitt would not compete in the Big Ten.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
They struggle against a lot of teams last year that they really shouldn't have. I mean, what was the final score of that Pitt versus MSU game?
The Peach Bowl?
31-21, Michigan State won.
Well, so let me run through this before we move on. I was kind of reading about it. Not only did he just say that they'd be a contender in the Big Ten, he did say last year, and I hate this, if game, because I try not to play this a lot. Oh, if we had Kenny Pickett, if we had this and that, we would have won. How do you know that? Then he should have played then.
Yeah.
You're 1-5.
The other thing. They lose by 10 to Michigan State. Contender? Okay. They lost by 10 to Michigan State.
And
Michigan
was
State
Kenneth
lost
Walker
by 50
play?
to Ohio State. The contender in the Big Ten.
Did Kenneth Walker even play in that game?
Let's check it out.
I don't think he did.
State stats. Kenneth Walker did not play.
So how about that? What if they had Kenneth Walker?
They let Peyton Thorne throw 3 touchdown passes, go for 350-plus yards.
Yep.
They let some absolute nobody wide receivers and Jalen Naylor, Jaden Reed, Trey Mosley, Connor Hayward go huge in that game. I couldn't tell you a name off of Michigan State's team other than Peyton Thorne, Elijah Collins, and Kenneth Walker from really last season. Kenneth Walker was the storyline. The defense was mediocre at best a lot of times. They didn't really have any superstars on that team outside of Kenneth Walker. And they put up 21 points in the fourth quarter to steal the game.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to play that game, how about if Michigan State had Kenneth Walker too?
Right,
and
that was kind of the reverse last year of, but I mean, they didn't have Kenneth Walker. And you got to remember, I mean, Michigan State, you say a contender in the Big Ten, they got decimated by another contender in the Big Ten in Ohio State, 56-7 the week before Ohio State went to play Michigan.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, 1-5 in your Big Ten play as a head coach at Pitt. You beat Penn State one time, but they beat you 3 times after that. Michigan State beat them last year, and I think there's one other team I'm not remembering, but you don't fare well against Big Ten, so I don't know where you're getting that from. And like I said, just to use the excuse, if we had Kenny Pickett and the other guys around them too, well, number one, they shouldn't have opted out then. And number two, again, you're missing Kenneth Walker. You want to play that game? We'll play it. I mean, you're not going to
this stat too, Mike, for you.
I got one
Narduzzi has had 5 bowl games in his coaching career. He's won 1 at Pitt.
Yeah.
At Pitt, 2021 was his best season, 11-3. Before that, 6-5. Before that, 8-5. Before that, 7-7, 5-7, 8-5, 8-5. And then the guy before him was Paul Christ, who went up to Wisconsin and did just fine up there.
And again, you want to talk about whatever division. You can put them in the Big Ten West or East. It doesn't matter. They're going to stink. They're going to struggle. Right. You can't even succeed in ACC, which is considered by us and a lot of the people as the weakest Power 5 there is. Look at this. Virginia, probably the hardest team. Out in Miami, they're going to have a good year.
What Miami is.
Yeah, but they've been bad.
That's kind of one of the question marks, and it doesn't matter.
I'm talking in general. Probably since Narduzzi's been there, Miami has not been that good.
No.
Virginia's had some hit or miss years. And look at the other team. And North Carolina's had some okay years, especially with Sam Howell the last couple years. But look at all these other teams, not good. Georgia Tech stinks. Duke stinks. Virginia Tech, I guess they're decent, but no. You can't even succeed in that division, and you want to be in the Big Ten.
Pat Narduzzi has also had one top 25 AP poll finish in his career, and that was last season.
Yep. It's not going to happen this year either.
No. He needs to calm it down. He barely has a winning percentage over 500. He's got a 589 right now.
And I don't even know how this got brought up either. I don't know if it was ACC Media Day or what.
For the conferences, that's why.
Yeah. Whatever.
Just like we saw some other comments made by a few other commissioners.
Yeah.
Down in the SEC, they threw it out there that they weren't going to go running to add teams because the Big Ten added two. It's like, you guys did it first. You realize that, right? We're not going to go run to add teams. We don't need to add teams to the SEC. It's like, no, you started this with bringing Texas and Oklahoma. Stop trying to push the blame elsewhere. Yeah. Typical Southern move. Oh, it's not our fault. We didn't do it. What do you mean? You did the whole thing. It's like the South trying to blame the Civil War on the North. No.
Yeah.
You lost that battle 200 years ago. Stop fighting it.
And how about yesterday, too, the SEC Media Day? I think it was yesterday. Now Jimbo Fisher's kind of downplaying that big beef with Saban. How about that?
Yes, I love that.
People circle this whole thing. You called a separate press conference when this happened with Nick Saban to bash Nick Saban, and now everything's okay. Yep.
I love it. Just perfect. It's a total backing off, too, of just like, hey, yeah, we want to ride that hype train, get all that noise. Now the season's coming around, you realize, oh, we got to play them in 3 months. Let's back it off. Let's make sure Bama doesn't come in mad against us to go put up 100 points on our A double squiggly letters, as famously quoted by Ryan Day of Ohio State.
Yeah.
Didn't end up happening because Michigan backed out of that game, but Ohio State would have put 100 up on them that year. That was a bad Michigan team that year. That was bad.
And
this last season was a really great Michigan team. I'll give them credit for that last year. A really great team.
Well, okay. Before we move on to, I normally don't go for anybody in that game because I don't care for either team.
Right.
But if things happened last year, say Ohio State wins it the same type of way as it's Michigan won last year, sign me up for it. It's a rivalry. I want to start seeing it back to the way it should have been.
Yeah.
Give me it. I want good games.
Mike, here's the thing. Obviously, as a Buckeye fan, I want my team to win every year. But I realize if this is going to be a good rivalry and competitive, and as it should be, the winner goes to the Big Ten championship, that's how this rivalry should be.
Yeah.
Then looking at that outside of being a Buckeye fan, perfect. A+. That game went perfect. Because for the first time, it has set a fire into the rivalry. Right? I mean, right now, you're talking about that beef between Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban. I think Harbaugh and Day, they got a beef going right now. It's not getting the media coverage like Jimbo Fisher and Saban, but they got a lot of back and forth shots. It's not as constant. No one's calling press conferences to go bash the other guy, but you see it every time they do step onto a microphone and step up onto those podiums and start talking. They're always throwing shots at the other team.
Yeah,
and it feels like for the first time in a while, we have an actual rivalry coming back, and that's great. I don't want Michigan to beat us, obviously, but looking
entertainment
at it, stepping aside from being a Buckeye fan and being a Buckeye faithful, going strictly analyst mode here, this is perfect for college football. This is what college football needs. It needs rivalries. In the last 20 years, hasn't been a rivalry. You talk about the dominance of Jim Tressel. I think he lost, twice to Michigan in his career? Urban Meyer didn't lose. Luke Fickell sucked that season, still beat Michigan because they were even worse than Ohio State. And you just look at the rivalry, and there hasn't been anything there. Jim Tressel made the maize and blue, his something, and Urban Meyer just continued that dominance, and there was no level of competition against Ohio State in that rivalry. Hopefully, Jim Harbaugh's got something now. He's got some confidence. He bought himself some time. Let's see him do something with it. He's got to take advantage of this. And he won the rivalry for the first time, and you would have thought that was enough to give him some help recruiting. And then you see how badly he's flopped recruiting this year and next year. His recruiting numbers are terrible. He's doing nothing to continue beating Ohio State, and that's the biggest problem. But he beat Ohio State. The rivalry has been reset. in all terms. Ohio State was one game away from tying the all-time win streak in the series at 9 games in a row. Ohio State had 8 going into that, would have been 9, but the 2021 game or 2020 game got canceled because of COVID. Sure, it did. That's why. But I think there's a lot of potential now that this rivalry finally means something again. In that final Saturday in November, I think this year, honestly, we got 2 undefeated teams going into the shoe, and it's going to be one hell of a game.
Well, for me, obviously, I hope they're not undefeated going in because my team has to play both of them.
Right.
But
you're hoping they're each one-loss teams, right, Mike?
I do hope that, and I hope it's my team that has the one that has to matter. But from that part of it, to be serious, Michigan did whether they flopped recruiting or what. At least they got the monkey out the back last year, like you were talking about. Yeah. And sometimes all it takes is one. And sometimes that's what it takes to get you back on track. We saw it when the last time Penn State beat them. They sucked before that. With all the scandals and stuff, they had down years recruiting. They couldn't recruit. And I think the game before that, the Minnesota game, got somewhat back on track. But that Ohio State game put them back on the conversation. Michigan, that kind of is the same thing with them last year. I don't know if they're going to be some type of contender this year. I think there's a good chance they go into that game with 1 loss or 2 or maybe no losses. But I want that part of it. I want these 3 I'll even throw, not this year, but I'll even throw my team in there too. I want some type of a thing like I said the other day with how Pitt, West Virginia, and Penn State used to be. I want this Big Ten version of it with these 3 teams.
Yeah.
Big brawls going at it.
I'll throw Michigan State back in that mix because there was that time. What was that? 2015, 2016, where Michigan State was on top of their power. Penn State was there. Ohio State. And then Michigan, they were coming up. They were kind of getting back into it. They still weren't, they put up some competitive games against Ohio State. And I think there was this time period, you looked at Ohio State, and they were having 3 rivalry games in 3 consecutive weeks sometimes when you talk about those matchups. And that right there was the peak of power for the Big Ten. If they can ever get back there, you're going to finally say the Big Ten can't compete with the SEC again. That's why for a while, us on the show here and a lot of analysts were saying Big Ten, number 2 conference, but maybe number 1. Last year, it showed SEC is miles ahead of the Big Ten yet again because the Big Ten's had that fall off. No one of the Big Ten has stayed consistent outside of Ohio State, and that is the biggest problem facing the Big Ten going forward. But as an analyst and as a Buckeye fan, I want to see Penn State get good. I want to see Michigan State good. I want to see Michigan good. And my biggest thing, I want to see Michigan come into Columbus 11-0 this season because I want to be the one that ends that streak again. Because having your rival come in undefeated, no better feeling than handing them that first loss. That's why I love it when Ohio State's undefeated, Penn State's undefeated, go head-to-head. And I hand you that loss, sir. As it was when Penn State beat Ohio State, you handed us that 1 loss. And I'm sure it felt great until you got to the end of the year and they went, Ohio State's in the playoff anyways.
I didn't.
But I'm sure you can't change it. Time to be that one in Ohio State's almost perfect season.
Especially that year when nobody's expecting to beat them too. They come in 4-2 in that game. Nobody's expecting to beat them. But it's Ohio State fan. I'll ask you this because, like I said the other day, 90-ish% of the games they're going to win.
Yeah.
Obviously you want to win. You want to beat teams. Like, sometimes you just want more games that you are close in, that you expect dogfights in instead of blowouts, for entertainment purposes and to build up your resume.
Okay, I'll answer that one. I don't know if I necessarily want games that are closer, as you say, for that, but I want games that matter. How about that?
Yeah, I agree.
Because I think I look at the last few years, especially with the COVID year and all the chaos that came with that and how it's kind of messed with the Big Ten, I think a little bit more. Teams have kind of struggled to rebound off of it. I want to come in on my Saturday and turn on a game for Ohio State and be like, I need to watch every snap of this because this is a very important game.
Yeah.
And I haven't had that. I mean, I listened to Ohio State, Penn State on the radio last year coming back from a game in Cleveland. And Matt and I were sitting there in the car cheering and going back and forth and whatnot. By the end of it, Ohio State pulled away. And when you kind of got to a point, it was like, all right, the game's over. And it's like, and when Ohio State won, it didn't really matter. And that was the thing when it finally came down to that Michigan game and I had the first game that mattered and we lose, especially after the Oregon loss earlier, it was crushing. But it was almost a relief that we didn't have to go to the college football playoff this year. And I think at some point it was a reality check for me as a fan. And I hope it was a reality check for the players and the coaches that, hey, yeah, you're Ohio State. You're the stand in the Big Ten, but you're not invincible. Yep. And I hope moving forward, it kind of does the same thing that the ACC did with Clemson. Other teams realized, hey, they're not invincible. Ryan Day was undefeated in the Big Ten before that. He was invincible. Michigan finally put him down a ring. And I don't hope other Big Ten teams jump on that and go and beat us, but I hope they realize that Ohio State is touchable for the first time in decades because they got a young head coach. And give a young head coach time. He's one of the up-and-coming best head coaches in football. He's going to be there eventually. I don't think there's any doubt to that. Ryan Day is going to eventually be that guy that takes over college football, hopefully. At least in my book, I hope that's the case. And I think it's very easy to see that he's got one of the brightest futures in college football coaching. And obviously being at Ohio State is going to help that out a lot. But I want games that matter at the end of the day. I want to go in there with top 10 opponents. Ohio State's got the second best win percentage against top 25 opponents since 2017, I think it is. They've won 80% of the games. Alabama's won 85% of the games. Most of those games, though, came 4 years ago. Ohio State, we're looking at one or two ranked opponents by the end of the season on that schedule. And one of them is Michigan. One of them, comes out of the Big Ten West most of the time, whoever's in first place over there that Ohio State has a win over.
Yeah.
I need games that matter as Ohio State because at the end of the day, as a Buckeye fan, it makes it more stressful sometimes because we can't lose a game. Ohio State can't lose or they're done because they don't have a strength of schedule behind them because the rest of the Big Ten's been trashed. So, yeah, I want the Big Ten good. As a Buckeye fan, there's nothing better than being the best of the best. I don't want to be the best in a pile of crap. Then I'm just the shiniest turd in the toilet. I don't want to be the shiniest turd. I want to be the gold cup. I want to be that champion. Everyone goes, yes. That's when Ohio State beat Wisconsin 50-0 in that Big Ten championship with Cardale Jones and Zeke and Bosa and maybe the best football team Ohio State's ever fielded. That championship meant something because you look at the Big Ten that year. It was great Big Ten. Wisconsin was awesome. They had a great running back who's been in the NFL ever since. You just look at the rest of the conference in the East, especially that Ohio State had to go through. It was awesome to watch. And they did that after, so much adversity in the season, and they won a meaningful championship. Ohio State did that, I'll say kind of last year where Michigan was their only opponent that really mattered. I don't think it would have held the same weight, and I don't think they would have won a championship because of it, because I think you look at what the Big Ten was and what it is, and it's definitely regressed. It's taken a step back. And as a Buckeye fan, I need it back at the height of its power. It looks best for me. It looks great for college football, and I don't want to be compared to the Pac-12 or the ACC or the Big 12. I want to be compared to the SEC.
Teams are coming to our conference.
Yep. But, Mike, we got to finish off the show here really quickly. What's your highlight of the week? I'm going to go the home run derby. That was awesome.
I'm going to go my guy, Dave Bednar, in the 8th inning because Edwin Diaz allowed him to be in it.
All right. Do we have a meathead of the week? Matt's not here. He didn't give us anything.
He didn't give me anything.
Jimbo Fisher?
Yeah.
For backing out of his word there. All right. We talked about that already. So I've been Alec Berna. That's Mike Wolfgang. Hopefully we're all back on the show next week and we can get a full week of who knows what. Probably switch back over to NFL potentially. Talk a little bit more there. Check in with baseball as we always do. But Power Hour coming up next. NABF World Series on your sports network going on all weekend long. Make sure to tune into that. I'll be calling a game tomorrow morning, so don't miss out. But I've been Alec. That's Mike. See you next time.